everybody hear me? Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you, Edwina, for the introduction. As Edwina said, my name is Gwyneth Seminar. I'm a solicitor from a firm called The Law Practice. Over on the side there we have our table with our goodies, and on the chairs with lots of pretty things that we've created for you to have a look at when you get the opportunity. We're a firm of solicitors. Our office is just outside of Birmingham city centre, and over our years of practice we've built up a lot of expertise in working with businesses and working with investment landlords. I've been a solicitor for 25 years, and in that time I've done a lot of litigation-based work, including rent actions, possession actions. And my colleague Lynette, who's over at the table, has spent almost as long as that buying and selling houses. So between us in the firm, we can actually provide a very good, practical and very friendly service to those people who need our help. But what I want to talk to you about today is how can people take occupation of your houses on formal AST agreements, not pay you any rent, and stay there for something like 11 months. Over the years, I've had a lot of landlords with this sort of situation. And the worst one I remember was a young guy who'd obviously thought it was a good idea to get into property investment, and he bought a house. Bought a house probably at the right price and in the right area, and did all the right things. But what he didn't envisage was that his tenant was not going to pay him. The situation went on for months. His tenant wasn't paying, but he still had to pay his mortgage. And the poor guy was at his wit's end. The agents were just not, in his view, not helping, and there was so little that I felt I could do in practical terms to help him out in the short term. So that being said, I'd like to tell you a story about some clients of mine who've been in a similar sort of situation to this. They're very experienced, organised investors. I did actually wonder if they'd be here tonight, but I won't say their names to protect the innocent, and they're not here. They bought 2 or 3 houses, 100, 120 grand or so in the north part of Birmingham. They did their sums. They knew that with those houses, if they were
Yes, turn your pacemakers on as well.
It's all right, yeah. Thank you. They knew that with this little group of houses that they were okay. If one of them started to wobble, then the financial situation from the other two would protect it, and it was okay. And that's what happened when the first tenant started to default. And he was the sort of tenant who paid spasmodically. £450 rent. He paid some of it some months, part of it other months, missed it totally. It was a real pain in the neck. They got that one sorted out without having to take possession action. But then the next door tenant, it must have been contagious in Walsall or wherever this was. The next door tenant started to stop paying his rent altogether. And this is the story that I thought was a perfect example for us to talk about today. My clients, when they'd entered into the AST with their tenant, they'd issued their Section 21 notice straight away. So as far as that was concerned, they were protected. For those of you who don't know, when a landlord gives a tenant occupation of a house, then for the period of that fixed term tenancy, 6 months, 12 months usually, the tenant has the right to stay there unmolested. And at the end of it, the tenant will either leave or will carry on some other form of tenancy. In this situation, the tenant stopped paying rent. He went 1 month, he went 2 months, he went into the 3rd month without paying rent. And my clients, through me, served a Section 8 notice. There are 2 ways to get possession of a residential house in these circumstances. If you go the Section 8 route, that's the Section 8 of the Housing Act, then you're saying to the tenant, if you tenant are in arrears for 2 months, then I'm going to serve this notice on you. And that means that if I have to make an application to the court, then the court has to give me possession of my house, eventually. The alternatives to the Section 8, the ground 8 that is if the tenant, like the first example I gave you for my clients, pays in dribs and drabs and pays sometimes and he falls into rent arrears. So it's just a pain and it's a periodic problem. You can go to the court for a possession order in those circumstances, but that's not a mandatory ground for the court. The court can say to the tenant, why haven't you paid? Are you going to pay? Oh, you've given me some money off the arrears, or you've given the landlord some money recently off the arrears. We won't make a possession order now because you look as though you're getting it sorted out. So, going back to my clients, they got 2 months' rent arrears. They served their Section 8 notice. They had to give the tenant 2 weeks under the Section 8 notice before they issued the county court proceedings anyway. So we've got 2 months. Nothing ever happens, does it, ladies and gentlemen, straight away. Everything has a bit of a time delay. And then you've got to add on the time of the postage and the time of the instructions and the time of getting things done. So you've got the first 2 months. And then you've got the 2 weeks prescribed notice period. And then probably another 2 weeks whilst all this is happening. So you're on 3 months. And the tenant's still sitting there without paying you any money. So we then have to issue county court proceedings for possession. My clients in this particular instance decided that they wanted their rent back. This is how things can take longer. There is a shorter and quicker procedure for those who know. We issued county court proceedings out of, let's say, Birmingham County Court. It really doesn't matter. We issued those proceedings. So that means the summons was drawn up by me, went into the court. The court clerks it in, gives it a number, and actually gives it a hearing date. And that summons is then served on the tenant. So by that time, we're at month 4, I would think, and certainly knocking into month 5. That hearing date is a very short administrative hearing. It only lasts a few minutes. If the tenant turns up and gives some reason for his non-payment, then most courts will adjourn that possession order to a proper hearing, a full hearing, later on. If the tenant doesn't turn up, thank heavens for that, and you'll get your possession order, and you should get some order for the rent arrears as well. I've lost track of this a bit. I think we've issued, was that month 5, Adrian? Are you listening? Yeah. Okay. So we've got our short hearing, and the tenant turns up because he's a bit switched on. He's been to the CAB, he knows what he's got to do. And then it's adjourned for this longer hearing. So you learn